The Biostar Z690 GTA Racing is the flagship motherboard of the GTA Racing series of products. This board has all the elements that make a motherboard good, especially in today's market, which is filled to the brim with subpar motherboards that promise performance and only deliver on the RGB LEDs. However, can the Z690 GTA Racing be any different? The Z690 GTA Racing from Biostar, it has a unique name, that's for sure, and a design that is in between a workstation motherboard and a full-blown RGB gaming model. However, with the Z690 series, Biostar has shown that they can deliver good motherboards that will work with a wide array of CPUs and RAM kits. In terms of the pricing, the Biostar Z690 GTA Racing is in the same place as many Z690 motherboards, not cheap at all, with a last known price tag of close to $315 US, and that's quite a lot for just a motherboard. Mind you, given the state of the market, nothing is quite a lot enough. When we talk about the accessories, there isn't much, which is unfortunate for a motherboard of such caliber. You get a user manual, a DVD with all the drivers, 4 all-black SATA cables and a few M.2 SSD screws, and that's it. Fortunately, the protection offered for the motherboard is great, with a soft foam tray pad holding everything in place and a solid cardboard box that will protect the inside packagings. The design of the Biostar Z690 GTA Racing is unique, with a Tron-inspired graphics pattern applied on everything from the SSD and VRM heatsinks to the actual PCB of the motherboard. The blue color is not for everyone, that's for sure, and it will not match everything in your system, but when compared to other motherboards, the Z690 GTA Racing is different and will easily stand out in your system. However, the design is not what makes or breaks a motherboard. What we need from a motherboard, especially one that is expensive, is a good VRM system, and the Z690 GTA Racing delivers just that, with a 17-phase VRM system. The MOSFETs used on this VRM system are made by Intersil with the model number ISL 99390. This chip is often used on high-end motherboards, especially on the flagships and Halo models, thanks to its performance and proven reliability. The capacitors used are made by APAC and are part of the APCON 10K series. Again, these are high-end capacitors that we've seen on many high-end motherboards from both this and last generations. The power for the CPU is delivered through 2 connectors, one with 8 pins and the other one with just 4 pins. As is the case with many motherboards, the additional 4-pin connector is only needed if you are trying to overclock your CPU, otherwise the single 8-pin power connector will be enough for your daily usage and gaming. The cooling of the VRM system is done by 2 large heatsinks. The one on the left of the CPU socket is made from solid metal and has a few fins cut into its surface. The one on the upper part, though, is much better. This is an actual heatsink with aluminum fins installed on the lower part of the heatsink. In addition to the cooling fins, Biostar has installed on the back of this heatsink not 1 but 2 small high-speed fans. Usually such fans are loud and will work all the time, but these are quiet. One good thing to see here with this smaller heatsink is that its base is made from solid copper and makes direct contact with the VRM components through a thermal pad. The heatsink used on the motherboard chipset is simple, as it's just a solid metal piece with fins carved into its surface. It too has RGB just like the cover of the I/O panel and the VRM heatsink. The Z690 GTA Racing has a total of 3 M.2 SSD sockets available, and each of them has a dedicated metal-made heatsink. Unfortunately, these heatsinks do not really have any fins and are mostly just pieces of metal, but they will work enough for an M.2 SSD. The top 2 M.2 sockets are PCIe 4.0x4, while the last M.2 socket is a regular PCIe 3.0x4. For regular storage, this motherboard has no less than 8 SATA 6GB connectors, all of them right-angled for an easier cable management. While the Z690 GTA Racing has full Wi-Fi support, it does not have included a Wi-Fi network card. That one you will have to buy yourself and install it as well. The Wi-Fi antenna cables are left unconnected on the top M.2 socket. While this is a drawback, it does give you the chance to choose whatever Wi-Fi card you want, and that's good. but it's not really acceptable at this price range. For the audio system, the Z690 GTA Racing uses a Realtek ALC1220 chipset and Nippon Chemicon capacitors for its filtering. As is the case with many motherboards, the entire audio system is isolated from the rest of the PCB to prevent any background noises coming through. In terms of the fan headers, this motherboard has a total of 5 4-pin fan headers. 3 at the top and around the RAM slots and 2 at the bottom of the board. There's nothing to say here. The location of these fan headers is good enough for your daily usage, although I would have expected to see 7 of them given the size of this motherboard and the price. Speaking of the RAM slots, there are 4 of them, and the Z690 GTA Racing can accommodate up to 128GB of DDR4 memory with a minimum frequency of 1866 MHz and a maximum frequency of 5000 MHz and above. Even though this motherboard does not have a post display available, it does have 4 status LEDs installed on the lower part of the PCB. While not the best setup in the world, these LEDs will help you track down possible issues with your system. The I/O panel is plentiful with 2 Wi-Fi antenna ports, a single combined PS2 keyboard and mouse port, 1 HDMI port, a single display port, 1 DVI-D port, 1 USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port, 5 USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, 2 USB 2.0 ports, a single LAN port, and 3 audio jacks. Not 6, unfortunately. All testing is done using an Intel i5 12500 CPU and an RTX 3090 Ti graphics card with a Neo Forza PHY 36GB DDR4 RAM kit, which is running at 3600 MHz. Obviously, we can't directly compare other motherboards with the Z690 GTA Racing as a different CPU was used, but we can compare the Z690 GTA Racing with the Gigabyte Z690 Aorus Pro. The first test is Cyberpunk 2077, updated to the latest patch. The game is running at 1080p with all settings turned to their maximum values and vertical synchronization disabled, and in this game the Biostar Z690 GTA Racing reached an average frame rate of 144 frames per second with a low 1% frame rate of 120 frames per second and a 0.1% frame rate of 98 frames per second, being on the first place with a frame rate gain of 1 frame per second against the Gigabyte Z690 Aorus Pro. The next test is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, also running at 1080p with all settings turned to their maximum values and in DirectX 12 mode, and in this game the Z690 GTA Racing reached an average frame rate of 232 frames per second with a low 1% frame rate of 100 frames per second and a 0.1% frame rate of 78 frames per second. In this game, the difference in performance between the Biostar Z690 GTA Racing and the Gigabyte Z690 Aorus Pro is small, with just 2 frames per second between these two models. Finally, we have an older title that is still played today, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, running at 1080p with all settings turned to their maximum value. In this game, the Z690 GTA Racing has an average frame rate of 267 frames per second with a low 1% frame rate of 144 frames per second and a 0.1% frame rate of 102 frames per second, with a lead over the Gigabyte Z690 Aorus Pro of just 2 frames per second, just as in the previous test. With all these video game tests complete, what can we say about the Biostar Z690 GTA Racing? Well, first of all, this motherboard is competitive, especially in a market that has been oversaturated with mid-range motherboards that feature high-end prices. Make no mistake though, the Biostar Z690 GTA Racing is not a cheap motherboard. However, it is good and well equipped, although it has a few shortcomings. In terms of the performance, the Biostar Z690 GTA Racing is good and will hold its own against the competition. The highlight of this motherboard is the overbuilt VRM system that not only uses high quality MOSFETs and capacitors, but it is actively and passively cooled by proper heatsinks. The shortcomings of the Biostar Z690 GTA Racing come in the shape of a lack of a digital post display, the lack of an included Wi-Fi network card, and only 5 fan headers. However, these are small things when we look at the bigger picture, which is a good looking motherboard that does perform well. While the Tron design might not be for everyone, it is different and will stand out in any type of system you will build. If you want a simple motherboard that has a good VRM system and plenty of good features, then the Biostar Z690 GTA Racing is a great choice for you. However, keep in mind that you will need to buy an M.2 Wi-Fi network card and install it yourself to gain Wi-Fi connectivity. If you like this review, then you might consider subscribing for more, and also if you want to support me in a direct way, then in the description below you will find the link for both the Patreon and the subscriber staff pages of this channel.